Okay, everybody, we're going to give this a go. I wanted to make this video in my office today. It's Sunday afternoon, but I was not able to get into my office. I won't go into the details, but we're going to try it instead here in my basement. I got this whole setup. I bought this whiteboard right when the pandemic began, like about a year ago. And this is an easel that my child likes to play with. As you can see, she has beautiful artwork right there. She's a Van Gogh in training. And I am not a Van Gogh in training. I am not good at drawing at all, but I'm going to show you how to draw mid-sagittal diagrams in a way that's good enough for this class, because mostly it's about the information that I want you to get across and the fact that you need to display that you understand what information is in these diagrams to my satisfaction, basically, or to Dushan's satisfaction, because he's going to be grading these exercises on the midterm exam. Okay, so I'll just walk you through what I do. Hopefully you can see it all right. So I'm actually probably not going to talk while I draw because I'm bad enough at drawing as it is that will probably mess it up. All right, never mind. That's a nose. That's a lip. You got to draw little teeth underneath your lip. And a row of teeth there as well. And then we'll kind of extend out the lower jaw here. So we got a nose, we got two lips, we've got two rows of teeth. Right behind the upper row of teeth, as you might recall, is your alveolar ridge. You can put a little bump there if you want, and then kind of extend out the curve of the palate, maybe around there. And then remember, the palate at the back becomes soft over here. It's hard up in front. You can feel that with your tongue. The back you can move up and down, and we'll put it a little uvula there at the tail end. Which is also something can move a little bit independently from the rest of the velum or the palate. But either way, it kind of dips down there, and then usually you kind of represent it like this. And then you can have the pharyngeal wall back here. So this is your throat moving back here. The one part we've not put in here, put a little nostril for your nose so that air can flow through. The one part we haven't put in here yet is the tongue, which is kind of the most important feature. So we'll put that in here like this. It dips down to epiglottis like that. And then we have, so the pharynx here, this is the epiglottis. Then it splits into the nasal tract up here and the oral tract here. The whole thing is your vocal tract. So that's, I mean, this is obviously not beautiful, but the information has gotten through, right? And I've done this a lot over the years, so I've had practice, and the more practice you do with this sort of thing, if you're not a good drawer, the better you get. Drawer. Anyways, so the idea is, right, one thing that's, so actually, I'll lay this out here. There are three things we want to be able to get across in this diagram. One is place of articulation. I'm going to run our rune there. So place of articulation. We want to get manner of articulation. And we want to get voicing or phonation. Is it voiced or voiceless? And the part that people seem to have the most trouble with here is the voicing bit, which is just kind of something you have to do by convention because you can't really see exactly what your vocal folds are doing. So again, I mean, wrong orientation, right? But you're looking through a speaker's head, like through the middle, like in this dimension. And so your vocal folds are here. They split open and close like this. So you could not actually see that looking through the midline, like in the sagittal view. So we have a convention, which is that down here in the middle of your throat, if you have a bumpy line like that, that's voiced. And maybe, oh yeah, I shouldn't even write. What am I doing? You guys are so lucky not to have to read any of my writing in this class this year. So that's voiced. And then, yeah, I'll erase it. And if you want to denote that it's voiceless, you usually put kind of an oval open shape here to say that this is voiceless, like that. So a lot of you have been doing something different. And Dushan kind of clued me into what was going on with this because I had a hard time understanding it. But a lot of people apparently have been like doing this sort of representation, like a squiggly line through it to represent voicing. So like that would be voiced. But actually I'm going to say that's bad. Don't do it this way because we're not trying to represent the air going through your larynx, although that kind of would make sense, but you can't see it, right? We're trying to represent what the actual organs of speech are doing. at this point in time, whenever you make this particular sound, right? So let's not put it in that orientation. And instead, we are just going to try to represent what the vocal folds are doing. If they're open, they're voiceless. If they're vibrating back and forth, if it's a bumpy line, that's voiced. For now, I'm going to leave them open, like this little kind of football representation. And so that's a voiceless sound. So put that up there again. Yeah, so what I'm going to do to start off with, I'll do the sound S. So we've got the phonation part of it down. Then we've got place of articulation and manner of articulation. So for S, normally I'd ask this in class, but an S's place of articulation, number one, is alveolar, right? And you can look this up in the IPA chart if you really need to, and its manner of articulation is fricative. So we're making a partial but not complete closure. It's narrow enough so that it'll make sound as it goes through as the airflow goes through the narrow passageway. So for this, gotta stop putting the cap on my markers. Anyways, we're going to make a narrow constriction here right at the alveolar ridge. So I'm going to get rid of this a little bit and kind of tweak it so that it makes a narrower gap there. Yeah, this is not going to look great, but basically, again, you don't have to make it look great. It just has to show the information in a way that can be understandable by anybody looking at the diagram, or at least me or your TA. So I've made a narrow constriction right at this alveolar place of articulation. So the alveolar part is right in here. And then we have, I will represent airflow here with the green arrow. So it comes up from our lungs like that. You know, like I said, not good at drawing. I should quit while I'm ahead. Goes through the lungs, goes through the vocal folds, then comes in through here, and then squeezes through that narrow passageway and out here where it makes a bunch of sound. And we're not representing sound. You don't need to draw in this green stuff when you actually draw the mid-sagittal diagram. I'm just showing you what happens, right? So the narrowness of that constriction is the fricative part of it. That's the manner of articulation part of it. It's narrow. It's not completely closed. That's what will happen to the air as it goes through that passageway. So I want to switch this up and show you a different sort of representation. We'll go from S to K. And actually, no, I forgot something with S. So I'll erase this green stuff and correct myself, because there's a fourth piece of information which is crucial here that I forgot to make explicit. And that is what you're doing with the back of your palette. So this is usually a little easier on a whiteboard or a chalkboard in class, but we'll make it work. So I kind of lost my teeth and lips here. Carefully put them back. And so the problem that I had with this first representation is I left the velopharyngeal port open. So this little passageway where air can flow up through your nasal tract, I left that open. So if we had kept the same sort of configuration for that previous articulation, this could go sneak through here like that and then go out through your nose. In that case, it wouldn't have been in S, it would have been a nasalized S, and you probably wouldn't hear the difference so much. It's a little tilde. Like I said, you're lucky you don't have to see me write anything outside of this little video. But that's wrong. Articulatorily, that's not what you do. You close off that back part of your nasal passageway. When you actually produce an S, it's all oral. And so I will put the fourth piece of information in here before I forget it. Nasal oral, you want to denote that or represent that somehow in these diagrams too. Okay, so what I need to do for that, for an S, is close that off. And what happens when you actually do it, I think you've seen, hopefully, the video I put together, or didn't put together, but presented to you, the X-ray video, if you remember the film from a long time ago, with Ken Stevens speaking, all those strange sentences at the end. You can see the soft velum, the back of your palate go up and down, or his soft velum go up and down to close off that passageway when he wants to make an oral sound. So you just have to make sure that's closed, and that will represent an oral sound. If it's closed, that means air is only going to flow through your mouth, and you get sounds like S that are not nasalized, like that. So if we're open, as we saw before, that would be a nasal sound. So I'll give you a couple of different examples. I wanted to walk through up to the nasal part of it, but we got there a bit ahead of time. It's not that big of a deal. I want to make a K sound instead. So for an S, we have this narrow passageway at the alveolar place of articulation. So the manner is fricative, the place of articulation is alveolar. We're going to make a K, so we got to switch that up a bit, and we got to make a velar stop. So it's got to be further back in terms of place of articulation, and it's got to be a complete closure for the stop part of it. So I'm going to erase this. It's better work because I don't really want to do this all again, but I will if I have to. Anyways, so you make a closure like that, and this is not pretty. And in fact, it could be even a little bit further forward. Like up here is probably a better representation of the velar place of articulation. That's pretty close. If we're a little bit further back, it would be uvular. It would be the Q symbol. Yeah, I'm not really happy with this. I'll try to make it better. It's a bit tricky doing this with this setup, but it works. Okay, so that's about a velar place of articulation. And so this is velar. I'll get the green guy back to denote this place of articulation right there. And it's a stop, right? It's completely closed off. So if air were to come through here, it would be stopped up behind that closure and it couldn't go anywhere. That's a velar stop. What I wanted to change here to make it slightly different is to make that a voiced velar stop. So it's a G, like that. And the only thing we would change for the G is down here, right? So we don't have our little open football anymore. We have our bumpy little opening and closing glottis. So you can just put, you know, it looks like a little resistor, I guess, in a block diagram for an electric circuit. If that helps you, then think about that. Otherwise, just jagged up and down lines, like a waveform in acoustic phonetics, something to show that it's voicing down there. And put it in that orientation, the horizontal orientation for the vocal folds opening and closing. That's how it's normally represented. But this would be a voiced velar stop because that's closed off, and it's not nasal because that is closed as well. So as you can see, we kind of talked about this a little bit in talking about why we get some voice stops more often than others. But if air comes through this, the glottis, the larynx here, and it voices for a while, and it goes from the lungs up into the pharyngeal cavity, it gets blocked up there, right? There's nowhere for it to go. So if air keeps going through here, eventually it's going to get stuck, and then, you know, pressure changes, balance out, and you can no longer get voicing. We talked about that before, but hopefully this shows you that there's a relatively small sort of cavity here that you have to work with when you're producing a G that makes a voiced G hard to continue to produce. Yeah, the last one I wanted to do for you is Engma. Engma is also a voiced velar stop, but it's nasal. So we're going to incorporate the last piece of information there, the nasality part of it. And I got ahead of myself before. We'll just do this the cheap way and kind of just shorten the velum or the palate a little bit and leave a bit of opening there. And like I said before, that enables air to flow through the larynx first of all, through the vocal folds, through the pharynx, and then sniggle through this little open passageway and then out through the nose. And so in this case, air is going to flow through the nose. That makes that nasal as opposed to just an oral stop. It also doesn't sort of stop up the air in that sort of back cavity completely, so the air can keep flowing through the vocal folds as long as you want to, or as long as you can keep pushing it out of your lungs, basically. It's a lot easier to voice that sound in that particular case rather than a G. Which doesn't last very long. If you make a G, you're probably going to make it a nasal if you try to make it long at all. Engma, we don't normally make an sound for very long, but you can if you want to. Normally, if we make a long sort of nasal sound, make like a block it up at our lips. In that case, if you want to make a bilabial stop, it doesn't really matter what you do with your tongue in this diagram representation. Yeah, it doesn't look like a very good tongue. But it wouldn't be touching anything, right? So it'd be something like this, and then you'd have to close up your lips and just bring them together, hopefully in less sort of Dracula fashion than that. But just make a stop closure there so that air can't get through. Now you have an M rather than an M. And like I said, this is not pretty, but it doesn't have to be, right? What I want you to get across are these 4 pieces of information. Make sure we can understand what's going on with each of these items, and you'll be fine. We're not going to grade you on artistic skill at all. You can go to art school if you want to, but I'm not going to be teaching there for obvious reasons. And that's basically it for mid-sagittal diagrams. Yeah, hopefully that all makes sense. But if it doesn't, there's still a little bit of time to send me a question by email, but hopefully it'll be helpful. All right, see you in the next video in just a minute.